So today's talk, it's got three basic parts. First part I'm going to talk about are the 1838 claims themselves. Then I'm going to talk about the database, the online database, and how you can use it and how you can use it effectively in research. And then the third part, we're going to look at a case study for a full-blood Cherokee and see what we can learn about that Cherokee from the database. And I think I will. I'm going to turn my video off so you pay attention to the screen and not to me. So it's always important to establish context in everything we look at and consider. The Trail of Tears is about the removal of a people, but it is also about the removal of real people. Someone's mother, someone's father, a brother, a sister, a grandparent, a child. This is not about nameless, faceless figures lost to the mist of time, but real human beings who wanted to live their lives in peace, grow their crops, tend their livestock, feed and care for their families, laugh, cry, rejoice, and mourn. How do we today engage more people into telling the narrative and the legacy of the removal? It's critical relative to people in local communities in the East and along the routes whose involvement in cooperation is needed to preserve and access historic sites. It's equally critical to involve younger people. People do not connect to dry recitation of fact. People connect to real people and to their stories. When we look at this map, we see a very typical map from the first third of the 19th century. This shows the Cherokee Nation in the middle of the southeastern US. The perspective of this map is from that of the US. The Cherokee Nation is presented as a big empty space, a big hole, the frontier, the edge of civilization, the middle of nowhere, nothing there at all, just a big black nothing. However, this map and many more like it ignorantly or intentionally hide the truth. When we look at this map, we see that this was the Cherokee Nation. This map shows the Cherokee Nation from the Cherokee perspective. For me, the first time I saw this map, it was an epiphany. This land wasn't a big black hole. This wasn't nothing. This was another country. This was another nation. It was a nation divided into districts. It had laws, it had functional courts, it had judges, it had elected representatives, it had police, it had election precincts, it had cities, it had towns, it had roads, it had communities. How you approach an issue is based on the perspective and the assumptions you start with. Almost all the records we use in research are rooted in the same perspective as the first map. Today, with the claims we're going to be talking about, it's critical to approach them from the Cherokee perspective. In the 1835 treaty, this comes from the National Archives Preliminary Inventory written by Edward Hill. And he said, the first Board of Cherokee Commissioners was established in 1836 as provided by Article 17 of the treaty to adjudicate claims arising under or authorized by the treaty. Its members were appointed by the President with the approval of the Senate. At first, the board consisted of two commissioners, Wilson Lumpkin and John Kennedy. In October 1837, a third commissioner, Thomas Wilson, was added. December 1837, Lumpkin was replaced by James Liddell. The board concluded its work in March 1839. Most of the claims were presented by Indians for compensation for abandoned property of the immigrants, for spoliations, and for lost reservations. It ended up taking 4 different commissions which lasted until 1847. That suggests to me a very questionable and suspect process, and for me raises questions of competency or unseen agendas. The Cherokee Committee that the treaty referred to was supposed to provide initial review for approval by the commission. This was not the Cherokee National Committee. Those who served on that committee varied, but it was a treaty party dominated group, if not exclusively so. I can't say that they were engaged in any unethical behavior, but it understandably would have raised suspicions and concerns among most Cherokee. My suspicion is just that they were window dressing and were following directives from the Cherokee Commission. The treaty, there appears to have been a pattern of reduction of amounts approved. There are normally no underlying explanations given for the reason. In this spoliation claim, there was a 25% reduction in the amount approved, but with no explanation. In this claim, which was for horses stolen in 1824, the claim was approved, but with no explanation, reduced by 33%. There is little apparent communication and even less responsiveness you see in these records. You'll see some people making the same claim multiple times. Were they being deceitful, or were they just uninformed, or did they disagree with a decision? The burden of proof always falls on the person making a claim or filing a lawsuit. But if the standards of proof required or the parameters are not understood or are changed at will or are inconsistently applied, then issues arise. We do not know if the claimants were ever fully aware of any of the decisions or actions by the first board of the Cherokee or the Cherokee Committee. Personally, I assume veracity and integrity of the claimants and the witnesses. That doesn't mean I am naive. Not everybody is honest, but give the benefit of the doubt initially, and you assume the individual integrity until you have a body of evidence that would suggest otherwise, but only on a case-by-case basis. It didn't happen just with claims. It also happened with valuations. These were not uncommon occurrences. The Cherokee themselves had to make the commission aware of their errors. Competency and completeness cannot automatically be assumed of everyone involved in the process, nor can we assume that just and equitable evaluation of claims for losses or for rightful ownership was ever followed. Now, within most of the removal records, these particular claims, the 1838 claims, they do not replace any other records. Most of the other records were created by agents of the US government. These 1838 claims add to and complement all of the other records. And the records are, as you can see, extensive. On August 15, 1838, John Ross wrote to General Winfield Scott. In part of this letter, he says, "I have presented to me almost hourly claims for improvements altogether omitted or erroneously valued by the valuing agents of the United States, and also claims for spoliations." That is what these claims are. Some are bound, some are loose. On the back of the loose claims, you will see this. Referred through John Ross, Principal Chief, to Major General Scott, Commanding U.S. Army for Settlement, Richard Taylor, President of the National Committee, Evan Jones, Clerk Pro Tem of the National Committee. These claims are an intentional pushback to the United States by the Cherokee Nation to the perceived failures of the U.S. to justly and fairly evaluate the losses sustained by the Cherokee. The Cherokee were not going to go away meekly and quietly. They were going to press their case. These claims are extensive. There are about 3,600 of them. Most are bound, some are loose. They're bound into several volumes, A, B, C, D, E, F, plus another volume for Willstown and in Alabama. It's numbered number 1 in the database. These claims are now spread across multiple repositories. There are no copies at the National Archives. At least 82 of the bound claims are known to be missing. If you ever run across any, let us know. There are likely far more of these claims than what we know about. Now, within the 6 alphabetical books of bound books, there's absolutely no apparent logical order to the arrangement of the claims. They're not arranged by date. They're not arranged by former residence location. They're not arranged by district. They're not arranged by agent. They are in absolutely random order, which makes them much harder to utilize. These claims began from a Cherokee perspective and not from an Anglo-American perspective. Do not approach these claims with any of the expectations or assumptions from which we all typically start. These claims will aggravate you and they will frustrate you, but, this is a big but, they provide insight not found in other records. The agents were all working for John Ross. Some or most of these agents are connected to very specific removal detachments. For example, most of the claims taken by James McCamey, who was a white man, specifically identify them as being the Hildebrand detachment. Beeson and Lowry, one white, one Cherokee, were at Willstown, and their claims are a part of the Bench detachment. But the composition of the detachment was volatile. Here are 2 letters, one from September, one from October, and they talk about the movement of Cherokee between different detachments as they decided to leave one detachment and go with another. Social safety net in a community is made up of family and friends and communities and clans. Even the volatility of this is a part of the narrative of the removal. These claims agents point strongly to a removal detachment for an individual, but it's not a definitive tool. Now, when these claims started, it was like a dam burst. It didn't start till the 2nd week of August. And in the 3 weeks of August, 51% of the claims were filed, 35% in September, and 14% in October. There was a huge pent-up frustration. Now, Winfield Scott did forward the claims on to the commission. I'm not going to read this letter, so I'm going to paraphrase what it says. And this is very typical bureaucratic responses. Nothing's changed. We got the bundles of stuff from you. We have a good system. We did a good job. There is nothing here. This is all John Ross's fault. So here is the main page, main access page for the claims. An overwhelming, and I mean overwhelming amount of these claims are made by full-bloods or Cherokee using their Cherokee name. It's obvious that very few of these claims will be for Cherokee who self-immigrated or removed early, and whether it was a treaty party or US government-led detachment. Along the top of the bar up here, you'll see title links, agents, districts, locations. I strongly, strongly encourage you to look first at the background and especially at resources and search tips. then read it all again, and then reread it multiple times. You're going to be most successful getting benefit to approach any research problem and attack it from every search perspective that you can. This is a very, very large database, and we're not Ancestry. So do not get impatient with response times. The more complex of a search that you try to perform, the longer it's going to take to get a response. At the bottom of the page, you'll see a search bar down there. That's where you can type what the specific name. The most common way most people are inclined to start a search is to look for a name. That's going to have an inherent challenge, particularly with full blood names. You need to be cognizant. What name or names do you search? What spelling or spellings of those names do you use? The information given in these claims is from what Cherokee considered relevant and important. The agents were mostly Cherokee and were not overly concerned about spelling things for your or my benefit. Handwriting at times is sloppy and can change even within a claim, and often is very hard to decipher. Names can be and were spelled multiple ways, even within the same claim. Here are, on a side issue, two different valuations. They're from Georgia. Cherokee used and were known by different names over the course of their lives, or even simultaneously. Name is only one factor in identity. Spelling of a name or spelling of a place bears the weight of less than or equal to 0. These valuations both include an English spelling and the name written in syllabary. I cannot read syllabary, but I can count. Allah on the left has 2 syllables in her name, and Susanna on the right has 3. But the syllabary names far exceed those syllables. You can think that a Cherokee name is unique until you find out lots of Cherokee living in very different parts of the nation also used that name. Who are the agents? Who are the other parties in claims? Oh, sorry, my bad. Okay. You can search for a specific name, deer. And if you search for deer, you'll get 74 hits. If you click on the left over here, you'll see the claim. So when this database was uploaded, there was a glitch, and the name standing deer got broken up into 2 different names. It's particularly an issue with witnesses, and work is going on to identify it and correct it. But you can help when you see these instances. At the bottom is a place to make notes for corrections. So if you see a problem, input it here. While these are primarily Cherokee claims, there are also Muskogee who were living among the Cherokee and who also file claims for their losses. You can search multiple spellings simultaneously using quotations. This is a search for the name Path Killer, both as a single word or as 2 words within quotation marks. You get 14 occurrences if you search for those exact letters. However, it reveals multiple people with that name who were from completely different parts of the nation. If you search for Path Killer as 2 words without quotations, you'll get 124 hits. But it will also include names such as Fawn Killer, Six Killer, or White Path. Here's a claim for a Cherokee named Moses, and I've mentioned some of the mangling of the names as a problem. Here's a claim where the 3 signatory names were glitched in the data conversion. So if you are interested in coming deer, you can search for the word coming, or you can search for the word deer, and you could get false positives that will include other people, standing deer or little deer. You can also search for variations on the spelling of comer. Keep a log, I'll advise you, keep a log of all the different names and ways you search. If you keep a log, and you'll find, and this was Excel, that's what I use, evaluate whether they point to a specific individual or multiple individuals. Who are the agents? Who are the other parties? Are there any commonalities? Are they all from the same district of the Cherokee Nation? Are they living in the same areas or in close areas? Do you see clustering of dates? Who is together on the same date before the same claim agent? Look for patterns for natural groups. Now you go back to the main search page, and we are looking for claims created from the world perspective of the Cherokee. Of all these thousands of claims, less than 600 of them refer to a US state, a US county, or an American city. They do refer extensively to the districts of the Cherokee Nation. So understanding the districts and the locations within them is critical. These were not nominal facades, but really functioning entities, very much a part of the daily lives of the Cherokee. If someone wants to add into the GIS mapping an overlay showing the district boundaries and the road systems and the then county boundaries and the current county boundaries, along with all the township ranges and sections, etc., that would be a great thing to accomplish. So if you select the option to go into the districts, this is the link that you get. So not all of the claims do include district info, but there's 1,370 claims which do not contain a district, but of those, all but 200 contain some other locational information. So place and knowledge of place is essential. So you can select each of these and see which claims fall into this category. So if you take the Omohee district, which was in Tennessee, what you'll see is that there were 311 claims, and you've got some options here that you can filter down. And of the 311 claims which mention the Omohee district, 225 were given before claims agent James McCamey. And McCamey, as I mentioned, was associated with the Hildebrand attachment. So you may see patterns in here where you can see how the detachments were being formed. Back at the main search page, if you want to focus on a specific community, location, or town, you select the locations link. And this is really the best way to search for those locations. You'll get this list, and there are 7 pages of these. But just like personal names, place names are subject to a very, very wide variety of spellings. And I mean a very wide variety of spellings. So you have to be prepared for how many different spellings can be identified for each town. With which district or districts is the town associated? Can you identify every one of these locations and places and place them in their present counties, state, or counties at the time? How large an area did each town cover? From these towns, which one of the removal forts were the residents most likely have been taken? What route would they have then been moved on to Ross's Landing or the agency? Who were all the Cherokee identified as being from a specific town? Are there multiple towns with the same name? Does that correlate with other records? Did they name the names of the perpetrators who dispossessed them of their improvements or sold property? Do any of those perpetrators show up in the land grants or deeds, which could point to a specific location for that Cherokee? What details or experiences of the removal did their claim provide? If a local chapter is trying to build a deeper relationship with local communities, the people in those communities, we'll say the local DAR, the local historical society, or some other group, they are going to be most interested in knowing the Cherokee towns and communities within their county and who were the specific Cherokee who lived there. So this is variant spellings of Ellijay and Amicalola. And Ellijay has spellings that start with an A, and Amicalola has spellings that start with a U. They pale in comparison to the spellings of Alakulsi and Nakuchi. While this is, for people like me who search for stuff, this is maddening. When we want clear, simple, easy choices. But each spelling can make sense from a phonetic perspective. Are you interested in uncovering how close our modern pronunciations are to how the Cherokee in 1838 likely pronounced these names? Or were there dialectical differences? There may be clues in each of these names. The spellings may point, as I said, to dialectical differences. Another potential project for Eastern State chapters. If you're interested in a specific town, get involved. You can also search on each of the various claims agents. If you have background or biographical information on these men, you may want to consider submitting a draft. Who were they? Some we know. Some may have been local justices of the peace. I do want to point out, when you see an image of a claim, you will notice down at the bottom, it gives an alphanumeric number. That is not the claim number. That is an image number. So if you are wanting to cite the source correctly, you see it in the database information. This is Book B, Claim 154. The image is B1043. So if you're citing your sources, make sure you cite the source correctly. Beyond that, stuff happens. I made errors. I misread stuff. I indexed this with a pad of paper sitting in front of an old microfilm machine. I ignored things later that I found out to be, or considered to be, important. We've said technical issues have happened. The options that we were faced with was, can this project for several years and go back and redo everything? Or you approach the problem from a crowdsourced perspective. If you find errors or omissions, note them, okay? If you're inclined to transcribe a claim or claims, the opportunity is there for you to do that. Here's a claim for a Cherokee named Arsena, who was from Shooting Creek. And if you look at the names of the witnesses, these are some that got mangled. And I did catch, if you look, there's a section called Notes and Comments. I did catch within this claim that this Cherokee also had a farm on Bell Creek in Georgia. However, I missed the fact that Arsena also had a farm on the High Tower. When you see it, if you see it, please make notations of it. Help make the database better. Also within this, the spellings of the names of the witnesses or the signatories, I should say, within the body differ from the spelling of the names at the signatures. So when you make your comments, add as much information as you can, because it will help someone else later. These are images. On the left is from an Alabama valuation, and at the bottom is from Moses Cameron, and it says he lived in Broomtown Valley at Mill Creek, and all it really listed for him was some logs. Now on the right is an 1838 claim, and in it, it gives his Cherokee name, Awaya, and his hometown is Disqualaskiti town, which was, he said, in Chattooga District, Alabama. So if you're lucky enough to know somebody who can translate, the name of that town means the place where logs are cut into boards. One of the witnesses was named as Takanasini, or all in the ice. And all of the BIA records for this man, he simply referred to as ice. No other record that I've found gives the Cherokee names of either of these men, unless they give the Cherokee names without the English names. The other witness was named Dirt Seller, spelled with a C, but all the other records spell his last name with an S. So was his name, was it a hole in the ground under the house, or was he a person who sold land? Don't know the answer to that. This is a claim for Nadawi. The Cherokee are telling us things that were important to them and that were a part of their lives. We tend to speed through stuff looking to quickly check off names. Slow down, take a deep breath, look at these claims as a way to see the lives of real people. Look at the crops they grew. Look at the buildings they had. Look at how those buildings were constructed. What farm implements did they have? What household goods? What furniture? All of this gives insight into these people and to the lives they lived and the world they lost. This Cherokee claimed peach trees and apple trees, but he also claimed honey locust trees. And those are much more known as a utilitarian tree than as a food tree. But they were important to him. I only indexed Cherokee names and Cherokee places. And I should have indexed consistently the names of perpetrators. How many Cherokee had run-ins with the same people? Does the person who displaced them of an improvement show up in the deeds? Does it point to a specific reference? Over how broad an area did a perpetrator show up? Was he a member of the well-known Pony Club? Indexing should also have included special and unique items like a stand, a tavern, a ferry, turnpikes, schools, churches, blacksmiths, fish traps, or even slaves. Now back. If you read a claim and see details like this that were not captured, please add them to the comment sections. Look for also signs of Cherokee culture. And this claim has a dwelling house, but it also has 2 hot houses. And I'm not a specialist on Cherokee structures. Is that a sweat lodge? Is that a greenhouse? Is that a winter home? Or is it something else? How many Cherokee claimed hot houses? And in what location or communities did they live? This is a claim of Tayuni from Talking Rock in Kusawati district. When you read the claims closely. okay? The name of the claimant is Tiani. The agent said Frost and Pot came before him and solemnly affirmed. The signers were Frost and Charles Lee. So who is who? Name, again, is only one component of identity. Here's a claim for John Deere, who was from Valley River in North Carolina. And we have an unspoken assumption, a lot of us, that the Cherokee were relatively sedentary and stayed in the same exact spot for their entire lives. That may or may not be correct. The claimant's location is given as Valley River, but within the body of the claim, you'll find the claimant also owned improvements in two other communities, Alakulsi and Ellijay. And the spellings were not on the other list that I gave. So this is all kind of interesting, but does it really work in the real world, especially for a full-blood Cherokee? There's lots known about the mixed blood families, but the majority of the Cherokee were not mixed bloods. The 80% on the 1835 census identified as a full blood. And the records for them can sometimes seem skippy. Just like the map, the first map, they were hidden from view. Where are they hiding? Are they in a big black hole? Were the figments, or were they the figments of someone's imagination? Is it really feasible for us to find them? Can we really learn about them and their lives? Can we really tell their narratives so they are remembered? When I was little, my grandparents owned a antique store. So I have always been interested in the material culture and what you learn about the material culture. So before we go on to part 3, we're going to watch a little video.
This was brought my great-grandfather from the Cherokee Nation on the Oklahoma border in 1846. And a Cherokee Indian warrior made it for him because he really did appreciate all that my great-grandfather, who was a lieutenant in the Army at that point. After he left Oklahoma border, he went to Monterrey, Mexico with his regiment, and then he brought it in the letter to San Diego on his horse, which is wonderful.
This bag was made by a Cherokee woman for her husband, probably, and it was meant to be worn around the shoulders with the pouch hanging at the side. And inside the pouch, it would carry flint, fire-making tools, kindling.
Oh, in this?
In the pouch,
oh,
yes.
Okay.
And fortunately, we have one object that remains that was inside the pouch, the little plug of tobacco. The designs are floral, herbal in nature. They would protect the wearer. They might help him in the hunt, help him in warfare.
You mean all these say something?
All of these floral elements do say something very specific, and it's meant to protect the owner. It's a very important bag. In the late 1830s, however, the Cherokee had a terrible tragedy. They were removed from their homeland in Alabama and Georgia and forcefully moved west under the administration of President Andrew Jackson. This is an amazingly beautiful bag. It's suffered a bit in its many journeys. The condition is a little bit rough. It can be restored. The colors in the bag reflect a woman with superior craftsmanship. She just had an amazing eye for color. All of the elements are trade elements. None of these are native or indigenous to Indian people. The red stroud cloth, the glass beads, silk thread. The bag is backed with printed calico, which would have come from England. Equally important from a historical perspective is this document. The document is dated 1846. It's signed by your great-grandfather, who was in the 1st Dragoon Regiment.
Yes.
One of the things that makes this document so very important is it actually mentions the bag. It mentions the owner of the bag and the circumstances of its collection and its history. It's just a remarkable document. It ties everything together. The bag itself probably dates to the 1820s. I think this bag in its present condition, if it did not have this very important document that tracks its history across the country, would be about $25,000.
Oh, my goodness.
However, the document and the name of the Indian Tukwo, a Cherokee, the bag and the document together, I think would have a value of about $100,000.
Oh, that's a lot of money.
That's a great deal of money. It would be a little expensive. It might cost about $7,500 to be professionally stabilized.
see.
Some of the beadwork would have to be replaced. There's a little hole in the cloth, the
know.
blue stroud
A
cloth.
moth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that could be filled in. And I think that would increase the value and increase its beauty. Thank you so much for bringing it.
Well, thank you for telling me about it.
The bandolier was acquired by Gilcrease. Dwayne King wrote a phenomenal article on this bag and with a solid biography of Tukwa, or the whale. At the end, I'll give you info how you can obtain a copy of the article if you'd like one. Tukwa actually swam across the river at Horseshoe Bend and was recognized by the President of the United States for his bravery and his service. He was awarded a medal and a rifle. He was severely wounded during his service, for which he eventually received a pension. He really was a true military hero. So within the article, these are the ways his name was spelled in different records that Dwayne found. And within the article, Dwayne put together a timeline of the life of the whale that came from this article. And for most full-bloods, that's actually a pretty extensive list. This is one of the U.S. serial documents, which talks about the events that brought Lieutenant Couch to the Cherokee Nation. Specifically, it dealt with the assassination of James Starr and others. And in there are named Old Man Tukwa and his son Taliski Tukwa, and several other names are mentioned. Additionally, there's some 1842 claims. And in those claims, Tukwa, his claim was witnessed by Samuel Grasshopper, said he came from Tinsawati. Side note, part of this claim includes the loss of a rifle, but it's not known if that was one of the rifles that he was given by the US government. There were other claims that were related to this from Dick Tukwa, Doc Tukwa, and Louis Tukwa. In addition to getting a pension, he also got bounty land for his service. And within there's a section that says, in regard to the claimant, the Indian agent says, he is the recipient of a rifle from General Jackson for services in the Creek War, for which his friends gave him the name of Whale. I know him to be one and the same. So there's no doubt this is the same man who owned the bandolier. If you expand this timeline to add this other stuff, just like the first map that we saw, there are holes. There are big holes in the timeline. One from 1770s to 1813, which is understandable. There's very few records available. But a third of his life, from the end of the Creek War until 1842, there are no apparent records for him in the East. He does not show up in the 1835 census, no apparent valuations, no registers of payment, nothing in the Bureau of Indian Affairs records under a recognizable name. The issue isn't the lack of records. The records are so expansive, it's hard to even grasp them all. The challenge is, how do you find a person who may have been known by multiple names, certainly with multiple spellings? Can you create a factual and accurate biography of such a person as a relative example of the removal when you can't find him in the records and you know he should be there? So the question is, how do you hide a whale? Well, you hide a whale in plain sight. When you can't find the person you're looking for, you identify his fan club. Now, I'm a fan of all of you, but this is not about shallow celebrity. It's a common tool that's used in genealogy and developed by Elizabeth Shown Mills. The goal of this study is not genealogy, but biography as educational narrative. What fan club stands for are family and friends, associates, neighbors, and within a Cherokee context, clan and community. You can't find the person that you want, look for the people who had contact with him. This involves also trying to conduct a reasonably exhaustive search of all the available records. So you can start off with everything that you know. Here are the list of names that were associated just in the two documents I showed you. There were lots of others, but that's where you start. And you build a spreadsheet. You go through the 1838 claims, looking for every name that you can find, every spelling that you can come up with for a name. You look for Tinsawati, the town he said he was from. You find out what district Tinsawati is in, and you search for that district. And you go over and over and over looking for this. The claims made by Tukwa and his family, or where they were witnesses for others, are in yellow. A handful referred, all but a handful refer to this being the Hickory Log District, which was the Eastern Cherokee Nation. Others, some identified Tinsawati, others Long Swap. Other places are mentioned like Bansbury or Blackburns or Scudders. Several of these names are also found among men who served in the same company in the Creek War with Tukwa. So it may suggest a geographical component to those companies. Now, you have to filter down to make things manageable. If you do this, now you look at the things that are the most significant. And then if you're using Excel, you can sort by the claims agents and by dates. And what you see is all the claims were given before George Still or before Moses Daniel. And time-wise, they were given within the same few days, about a period of 4 or 5 weeks. Now, going through this, you keep a log, as I said, of all the spellings. These are all the spellings for the names of these people. And for Tukwa, some of them don't start with a T, they start with an A. They have a vowel sound, A or an E at the first of it. So, Tukwa. His wife, Alkini, was listed as Olkini. Taliski, his son, also had alphabetics before his name. So, look and look and look and look. Think phonetically. This is a partial list of the fan club of the most important people. You still can't find Tukwa in any of the basic removal records. But you have this list of names and you know where they should be. As a side note, if you looked at the way the claims spell Tinsawati, and I don't know which of these is actually closest to being correct, but this was how the Cherokee wrote the names down in these claims. Now, there were a lot of claims that Tukwa and his family made, a lot. Taliski claimed for houses, corn cribs, fields, fence rails, peach trees, plum trees, hot houses, and a place at Long Swamp. He also had cows, calves, spinning wheels, pots, barrels, reels, looms, mattocks, baskets, crops on hand. Dick claimed a house, a field, cow pen, peach trees, plum trees that he was dispossessed in 1832. He had 2 fields, set of logs, a black horse taken 3 years ago by a specific person. He was forced to abandon spades, picks, blankets, chickens, looms, crops on hand. The father lost 5 cows, 5 horses, cows, hogs, turkeys, chickens, and he names names: John Kelly, Rattles, Ledbetter, Reese, Thomas, Carroll, Potts, about 14 years ago. He also owned a portion of a turnpike on the Alabama Road near Blackburn's on the Etowah River, which was dispossessed in 1830. He claimed for 2 houses, 2 cribs, a stable, a horse lot, 2 fields, peach trees. A name is Etukwa, or the Bull. He claimed 100 bushels of corn, 2 stacks of fodder done at Long Swamp about a year ago, and cash due from a white man named James Hill. He had household goods he was forced to abandon when the troops showed up: hogs, ovens, water pails, tin pans, bedsteads, tables, trays, fiddles, jars, jugs, pewter dish, pewter plates, teacups and saucers, plows, stocks, etc., etc., etc. And also a large amount of hogs and shoats he was forced to abandon. We all have presumptions, and the presumption in your head is almost like a cartoon character of what a warrior, a soldier would be like. And it wouldn't have included a fiddle and teacups and saucers. But what the details of these claims tell you is these were real people. These were real human beings that had real lives. And one of the claims I would not have looked at had I not been paying attention to the names, the extended names. It just simply says was a claim for Lewis. And even though I knew there was a Lewis Tukwa, it still probably wouldn't have been captured my vision. Down in the middle, if you see that kind of thick black line on the left, just below it, it says this place belongs to Tukwo, son. This claimant was dispossessed in 1831. And not going to go through the details of all of this that was mentioned in there, but just pay attention to the extreme detail provided about the lives. And this one was, like the others, given before Moses Daniel. So where was Tinsawati? Tinsawati was in what is now Dawson County, Georgia, which is kind of northeast of Atlanta. The U.S. Geological Service Domestic Names Database says it's the same place as Doherty, Georgia. I don't know if that's correct or not. This is an 1830s map. I'll just point out places here. There's Blackburn's, there's Scudder's, here's the Alabama Road. Down here was Moses Daniel's Ferry. Moses Downing's Ferry. Here is the Van Ferry. Here's Long Swamp. Right here, there's Moses Daniel's, and here's the Federal Road. When the state of Georgia surveyed the Cherokee lands in 1832, this is the district plat for that area. If you'll notice through here, here is the Etowah, the Hightower River. Here is what they called on this, the Downing Road. That's the same road as the Alabama Road. Here's the Chastity River. And this creek right here at the edge is Tinsawati Creek. I can't say, because I'm not an expert at it, which removal fort that the Cherokee from Tinsawati would have initially been taken to. And then what route from there that they would have been taken to the Council and Tennessee River. I suspect it was probably the Federal Road, but I don't know. So you had that list of fan club members. So if you go through the 1835 census and you highlight those people, there, hiding in plain sight, is Tucko, Tucco, and Dick Tucko, Tucco. How do you hide a whale? You hide a whale in plain sight, and you hide any full blood. If you can't find people under a name that you expect to find them, they're still probably there. Here are the details that the 1835 census gives us. The father had 16 Cherokee in his family, including 3 adult males. There were 5, everybody was a full blood. They had farms and acres, but nobody had slaves. That allows you to go find the valuations of their improvements. Dick Tucko on the left, the valuing agent there, and he said, this man's not willing to do anything. He wouldn't participate in this event. The bottom, David Downing, was not home. At the bottom right, Doc Tucko had been displaced, and he did not own his place. The above it on the right is Tucko, or Tuqua the whale, in Tinsawati, in what was then Lumpkin County, Georgia. Look at the detail that these valuations, which were done by the commission and their agents, give compared to what you saw, the detail you saw in the claim. You see much more information about the lives they live. Now, within this claim, it says Tucko has 13 in his family, and it adds this note. This old man is a counselor and says he would rather stay, but if the others go, he will do so too. He was a counselor. Actually, yes, he was. He was a counselor. This is a U.S. serial document from the Red Clay Council, October 1835, and lists the name of the members of the council, and in the middle is Tuquo, one of the council members. Here are the registers of payments where they were reimbursed for any claims losses. The only details this really give you is that they owed money to the Daniels and to the Buffingtons, who had stores nearby where they bought on credit. But it gives you their neighbors: Archie Van, Dick Tucko, David Downing, Tucko, Doc Tucko, and Drowning Bear or Yanaguski. Shout out to Curtis and the Oklahoma chapter within the records they got in Washington. One of the things were the 1840 rations that were given in there in the West. And in those rations, there are June and July lists for rations given at Adair's Depot in Flint District. And listed are Toquo, Taliski, says same, but it's Samuel, Grasshopper, and Tuqua. And they all came in the Daniels detachment, which I believe is a Northern Route detachment. And if you look at the services, who all performed services or did work in that detachment, you see many of the names associated in those claims. Moses Daniel was a conductor who was one of the claims agent, and George Still, who was the other claims agent, was the assistant conductor. Moses Downing, Gal Catcher, Sam Grasshopper, Lying Rock, Rusty Belly, and Toqua and Taliski. In addition to Tuqua's bounty land claims, there are bounty claims for lots of men who served in Captain Raincrow's company, including one for Dick, who I suspect is probably his son. And there were supposed to be 2 different whales in that same company. So it's probably him. When you put all this together, this is the timeline that you can build for his life. Fought in the Creek War, fought at Horseshoe Bend, had livestock stolen, was dispossessed of his interest in a turnpike, dispossessed of a house, He was enumerated in the census. He served in the National Council, dispossessed of his houses, buildings, and field, dispossessed of fodder and corn, loss of a rifle and personal effects, filed a claim prior to removal, immigrated west in Moses Daniels detachment, got rations at Adair's Depot, awarded a U.S. disability pension. He was involved in the assassination of James Starr. He gifted his bandolier to Lieutenant Couts. He was enrolled by Drennan in the Salem district. He applied for and was awarded a bounty land warrant, and he died later that year. People assume there are no records, especially for full bloods. Yes, there are. Their stories are just as important as those of the famous. We deal in history, we don't deal in mythology. The removal happened to real people, each of whose lives and stories deserve to be remembered. Being an unbelievably brave, courageous military hero was no guarantee Tuqua would be immune from harassment, spoliation, thefts, displacement, degradations, dispossession, and eventually forced removal. It's really sad for me to reflect on the words he told the valuing agent. In spite of all he had to endure, he still would have preferred to stay in his homeland. There were 16,000 plus Cherokee who were a part of the Trail of Tears. This is the story of one. Now, you have the opportunity to join in and tell the stories of the rest. So if you've not been there, there's the link to see the claims. I especially want to thank the National Park Service. They're the ones who made this database possible by their support. The claims are spread at lots of different repositories, none of which had to agree to participate and allow the claims to be included. So Tennessee State Library and Archives, the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, Western History Collection, Oklahoma Historical Society, and the Helmrich Center at Gilcrease. If you have any interaction with people there, thank them for their involvement. Thank them for their participation. Renee Harvey at Gilcrease, that's her email. If you would like to get a copy of Dwayne's article, offer to pay for it. Don't ask for free. If she wants to give it to you free, that's her you know, in memory of Dwayne King, you may want to give you know, a memorial gift to Helmrich as well. And our hope is that these original records are just the start, and more can be made available. That, however, it takes money. So if you'd like to, I'm sure the Trail of Tears Association would love to get a donation from you to expand these to more and more records. And with that, I'll answer any questions that I can. Thank you.